Hello and welcome to a Ceilidh Club special Spotlight edition. And today, this is where we look at Scottish people, Scottish businesses, Scottish organisations who are doing something special. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Martainn MacIntyre, who's sitting right beside me.
Hello, great to be here.
Now, Martainn is, I'm going to try and get this list right now. He's an author, a poet, a storyteller, a runner, and does a bit of doctoring on the side. Is that right? Have I missed anything out?
Just about.
Right, okay. Now, Martainn's had a very productive, well, he's had a very productive life in general, but he's had a very productive 18 months or so because he has had 4 books published, and we're going to look at them one after another. And the first one we're going to look at is this one. And I never know whether this is going to come through all right or whether it comes through reversed when you look at it, but it is the Running Between Two Dragons, correct? Courant entre dos drachts. And Martainn, you're going to tell me what it is in Welsh.
In Welsh it is Rhedeg Rheng Dwy Rec, and in Gaelic Rwy I'r Da Dragon.
Brilliant, right. There we go. And the reason that we're saying it in these languages is because that's the languages in which it's written. We've got English, Gaelic, or Gaelic, English, Catalan and Welsh. Now, Martainn, how did you ever come to write a book in 4 languages?
Well, first of all, I thought that I was looking around me in terms of the canon of Gaelic literature, and I discovered that there wasn't one. There wasn't a previous book in Gaelic, English, Catalan and Welsh. I thought, well, that's obviously the one for me. No, I also started quite naturally in 19, so it started pre-pandemic, visiting Catalonia, and not for the first time, but certainly a part of Catalonia near the border between France and a place called Ceilidh. A bit more time, children of a certain age, just poems came quite naturally, wrote them in Gaelic naturally, and then when I came home and I was honing them, I was thinking, yeah, I think there's the potential for a collection here, but I thought the collection needed some other dimension. I presumed we would go, as we've often done in the past, visited the Balearics, so I thought that would give some further sort of Catalan cultural stimulus, but I thought there was another dimension that would complement it all, and I don't know, light bulb moment, I thought, well, what about Wales? And the more I thought about it in terms of a Gaelic perspective on Catalonia and Wales, well, they are both languages spoken by a sizable percentage of the population. Roughly 18% of the Welsh population speak Welsh. Roughly 18% of the Spanish population speak Catalan. So a lot of people, 9 million Catalan, 600,000 Welsh speakers, but they're still not the main languages. So from a Gaelic perspective, I thought that it would be stimulating to journey in these countries and feel the strength of the culture and language and write about it through poetry.
Well, and journeying in the countries, where did you go in Wales and what did you find?
So I just journeyed through predominantly the north of Wales, started in Llandudno, which is a famous holiday resort, and I produced some interesting poems about visiting and holidaying and beautiful beach between Llandudno and Conwy, then into perhaps the heart of the Welsh-speaking land in the north, Llanfestiniog, and then into the Llyn Peninsula. One of the boons was there was a Welsh poet who unfortunately died in the First World War, and there's his home. I was very close to his home, so I visited his home. He's known as Heddwyn. Wrote some poems about him, and yeah, just about being in a very strong Welsh-speaking area, and responded to the countryside around as well. And eventually ended up in Cardiff, where the pandemic was just about to encroach on our lives, so that also added a different dimension as well.
Wow. And if you look at Wales, I mean, Wales has a far higher percentage of people speaking Welsh than Scotland does of people speaking Gaelic. Why do you think that is?
I think there's a number of things. I mean, the numbers have been greater, and I think there's been a strength in that. I think they got the education thing sorted a lot earlier. I don't know whether in some ways it's proximity to England, and they've had to just dig in and being a bit more a bit stronger about the language as being a key cultural asset. Perhaps also because there's been also an industrial tradition in Wales, an urban dimension to the Welsh language. Until recent times, there hasn't been with Gaelic. Gaelic's, until fairly recent times, until the Great Revival in the cities of the last 20, 30 years, has been largely a rural phenomenon, an increasingly rural phenomenon. So maybe some of these things.
And what could we learn? It sounds more like a conclusion a bit early on in the discussion, but what can we learn from Wales in what they've done to promote, defend and develop the Welsh language? What could we learn from them that might be applicable in Scotland for Gaelic?
Well, I think as I say, educationally, I think they've invested hugely in that. They've got very strong policies with regard to that. If you move to a Welsh-speaking area, all the schools there in Welsh, but they will give assistance to families moving in. They get help with language learning. Yeah, I think just Welsh medium education has been a major factor. I think politically, they've throughout the whole. I mean, it's quite interesting we're having this discussion in the Gaelic and Scots languages bill has just been just passed yesterday on St Andrew's Day. So we'll see what those extra rights, but they have extra rights and they use their rights. They have a demand to their rights. One of the things I assert in the book is the importance of literacy. So it would seem as if, compared to Gaelic Scotland, that people are more comfortable and it's more natural for them to use Welsh. They actually are comfortable reading and writing in Welsh, which has again been something that's been perhaps less valued in Gaelic Scotland, and the educational history of that is key to that. But I think that's been a very strong component as well in terms of their language development and their assertion of their rights.
Well, I've just been on the DVLC website for reasons that I wish I hadn't been in, concerning a van that I've got. But I noticed there, if you want this page translated into Welsh, click here. You can do that.
And I kind of imagine that more people will do that than you might think.
I
think there's that length, that strength of commitment, I think.
Right. Okay. And then onto Catalan. What was your experience of really the translation process into Catalan, and how did it go?
It was fantastic. Like with the situation with Welsh, I had sent a first draft of my poems in Gaelic and English to both of the translators. Ifor ap Glyn, former national poet of Wales, was the Welsh translator, and Noelia Diaz Vicedo was the Catalan translator. And then I spent 3 days in both countries with them, and that was a really useful process, just to spend time with them and for us to go through the poems. One of the interesting things about I've got reasonable Spanish, Castellano, my Catalan's still rudimentary, but often the way Gaelic sits in the Indo-European branch of linguistic trees, it sits closer to Catalan and the Italic languages, and Spanish and Italian, of course, than English does, which is in the more Germanic side of things. So there were a lot of parallels and things in terms of the rhythm and the syntax of the language between Gaelic and Catalan that actually worked in its favour. That we didn't have to go through English as such. Sometimes I had to go through Spanish for her, but she would, she has got, full fluency in English and had an English translation. But again, we tried to work as closely as possible to the Gaelic in terms of rhythm and sound, and also the words.
It sounds quite it must be a very empathetic process, sitting with someone and trying to explain the meaning of your poetry and what you were trying to convey to them. I mean, there would have to be a great understanding between you both.
Well, yes, I think it does. I mean, and actually, while we live in such a technological era, and probably a lot of it could have been done by emails and drafting, redrafting, just being in the same physical space and chatting about them and talking about them and being able to ask sort of spontaneous questions about what you're trying to get at there, but what's the real essence of that meaning? That's what the words say, but of course in poetry the meaning is often other than the words, but sort of conveyed by the words. So yeah, sometimes trying to find those meanings and trying to. And there's cross-cultural things as well. One of the funny things that Noelia was saying is she learned more about rugby through my Gaelic poetry than she ever knew about, because some of the Welsh poems are, were rugby. So there's cross-cultural things as well, and things. I'm travelling in their countries, their zones. there was things probably that I got the wrong end of the stick on as a foreigner travelling and making comments, and they would say, well, what are you trying to say there? And that was also very, very useful and very revealing as well. Their take on my take on their country. You know what I mean?
I was going to ask that because they must have been asking you probably more in-depth questions than you were ever asked at a book launch or anything else about these things. Did that make you think of the poems differently because you were being not quite interrogated, but you were being probed deeply?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, there was an interrogation process, and you're wanting to make them as robust as possible. You're wanted to make sure that what you were trying to convey on the page is actually being communicated to the reader, and who better than very, very well versed poets and translators to do that, and always people coming strongly from their own cultural background.
And it sounds an extraordinarily ambitious project to do this. And was it hard to get off the ground?
It was, but one of the things that clinched it was the publisher, and he's a guy who Francis Bootle Publishers, run by Clive Bootle. He is very committed to publishing high quality work, and I think it's high quality work and beautiful books across the supposed, you could call them the lesser used languages. And he had published in Catalan before. He published Noelia before, so that's when I first got to know her poetry and got to know him. So he, as soon as I mooted the project to him, he said, "Well, let's do it." But it took a bit of doing.
Really?
There was a few stages in the process.
Yeah.
So commenced in 2019 and just published last year in 2024. So these things take time.
Yeah.
And of course, a pandemic came in the middle of it all. So.
And just in Wales, I mean, you've been to Catalan a few times or so, or Catalan-speaking areas.
I had, particularly the Balearics. Yeah.
And but in Wales, had you been to Wales much before?
Well, no, and that was part of my reason for going as a kind of a journey of discovery to open my mind. I didn't have much in the way of preconceived notions of Wales. So I wanted to to find out what it was about. I'd been once before, very briefly.
Yeah. Okay. And what's it like?
It's great. I mean, it's a small country like Scotland. Some of the transport connections aren't great. Friendly people, trusting people. I've got a poem in there about this woman who very helpfully looked after my bags, and in a small place, and expected that I would be happy to leave my bags with her for her to look after. My expectation of her offering to do this was this is a person I could trust. These kind of things. Things in similar. Quite green in places. I was there in March, so. Typical weather you would get in Scotland in March, contrasting with Catalonia in July, and the Balearics. So it was revealing, and the people were really warm, really friendly, really interested in why a Scots person would be travelling alone in Wales and trying to get to know the place and get a handle on it. And like most places, multifaceted, complex, and a mix of people. Tourism. I mean, I think one of the links to both places is tourism. Tourism, is important to the economies of both countries, but has effects on local communities, housing prices, language,
second homes,
all that stuff. So that's all. It's all very interesting.
I'm just looking through here, just by the foreword here in this quote from Wittgenstein. The limits of my language mean the limits of my world, and that's one of the lovely things about bilingualism, trilingualism, multilingualism, is that you're looking at words in different languages and expanding the size of your world.
Indeed, absolutely. And I guess one of the things that always becomes apparent. When travelling in Europe is that bilingualism, trilingualism is the norm.
Yeah.
And that's to embrace.
Reflect on and develop. Right, okay. Let's move on to your next book, which is Poems Chiefly in the English Dialect.
Yeah, they've been published potentially in journals and that kind of thing over the years. I've written most of my poetry and prose in Gaelic over the years. Some of it's been translated. But as the title of the book suggests, most of these poems are in English, and as I say, I've written them over the years, and some more recently. Yeah, but there are a small number also in Gaelic and in Spanish and in Scots.
In Scots.
And the title, I suppose, is a bit of a cheeky nod to the great man himself, Robert Burns's collection, which was poems chiefly in the Scottish dialect.
Exactly.
So maybe it just sort of talks about the language.
Do you not think, Martin, that, I mean, Burns, he only wrote in 2 languages, but you've got a book with 4 languages there, so that means you're twice as good as Burns, without a doubt.
Absolutely.
So is there one of these poems that particularly strikes a chord to you on the 1st of December 2025?
Okay, let's read one. Since I'll read one of these. Let me think where we'll go. I've been a bit of a runner over the years, and huge congratulations on your half marathon 2 weeks ago, Ed.
Well, the moustache is gone.
Yeah, we've done a few together over the years. I've got this from Martainn Mac actually. So I thought, this is a poem I wrote. We'd run the Glen Clover half marathon. I was reflecting on running and racing and competition and about life in general. And I wrote this poem called The Same Race. The same race. We're running the same race, but we could run it better. Our pace could be more carefully measured, our breathing less laboured by guilt. We could be more aware of the wonder of our surroundings, the sheer timelessness rather than the times to be shaved, lost, subverted by age. We could wear our bodies less foreignly, pin a more accurate number to our vests, have a choice regarding the content, turn out with equanimity in all weathers to cheer the winning losers, thrashing the losing winners, without demanding the science of why or the date of the next such race.
That's lovely, Martin. And it did, if I reading into it there, it did make me think when I was preparing for this podcast. I was wondering what, how we can use poetry, because as you allude to this, and our life is so determined, so digital these days, and we're being pinged and ponged and everything else all the time. How do we use poetry in order to slow us down, to make us appreciate things that we might not appreciate otherwise because we're eternally distracted?
Well, I think one of the great strengths of poetry is it captures moments. It values moments and it captures them. So that immediately makes us focus our attention, focus our time. In a time poor aged, many poems tend to be short, so we can fit them into our busy times, but they also demand the time and the reflection needed to read them properly, to think about the nuances of the messages. And they are in themselves, both in the act of writing them, but also reading them, they ask us to take time, to slow down, to deliberate rather, and to reflect.
Well, that's a great shout out to poetry overall, because I don't know whether it's true, but it still seems to me to have an exclusive catch. Some people would say, "Oh, I'm just not into that." People might find it quite difficult to access poetry, or they think it's not for them.
Yeah, I think that's a perception, but I think there's a whole range of different poetic voices and different styles of poetry.
Yeah.
You know, from the sort of the folk poetry scene to the very cerebral poems that you might read in a collection by a poet of that ilk. And I think song is poetry as well.
Well, quite.
We listen to songs all the time.
I was going to say, I think my kids could recite quite a few rap songs, but I'm not sure if you put them down to a book of poems, they would say, "Oh yes, I must learn that."
Yeah, but there's some great poetry.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's lots of really moving and challenging songs being written in old poetry.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move on. Your novel. I've got 2 copies here. One in Gaelic. Martin, how do you pronounce this?
Ceilidh Sheachgad sa Hoch.
Okay.
Summer of 78.
Summer of 78, and its English translation being A Summer Like No Other. Now, this is set obviously in 1978, a time of what was happening in 1978.
Well, there's a wee thing happening which will be happening next year. In 2026, hey, Scotland made the World Cup finals. This time it was in Argentina. I was just a young lad, as were you, but perhaps it was maybe it was the most iconic one. I got a bit more involved in it, age 13 or so. But also Scotland had reached the World Cup finals in Argentina, but this novel actually takes place a long way away from Argentina in South Uist, but it's the background to the novel. Where it's a coming-of-age novel where a young 20-year-old drifting student in Glasgow University, Colin Quinn, who's got a Barra mother, Glaswegian father, growing up in Greenock, spends the summer with his uncle, also from Barra, who's doing a medical locum on the island, spends 6 weeks with him. And their relationship develops. He grows as a young man, grows as a Gaelic-speaking Gael. But in addition to all this, and quite unexpectedly, prior to his arrival, he gets involved in collecting folklore, and he begins to collect these stories from this old fellow who's never been recorded before, who lives in a thatched cottage called Alistair MacDonald, Alistair MacCabe. And he's pulled in by the power of the stories, he's pulled in by the power of this old man and his amazing ability to tell stories, and his warm personality, and also by the old fellow's, I suppose, main carer, his grandniece Jane. And I think he begins to grow up as well in terms of his romantic inclinations as well.
And it paints a loving yet challenging view of the islands, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, people have described it as realistic and non-romantic, over-romanticised. It's not Ceilidh, it's not quaint.
Yeah. Most
of the characters in the book are good people doing their best, and I think at the end, I think good overcomes evil. I think the overall, I would hope, impression that people would have of Colin's summer there in 1978 was positive. There are darker elements to it, and one of the characters in particular has he's a dark character, and he doesn't behave very very well. But I thought he was an appropriate character for the time, the 1970s in general. Either in cities or in rural areas had their dark elements.
Yeah.
And also the stories, because the stories, although he's collecting these stories, and they pertain to folklore, sometimes elements of folklore go back to the Middle Ages, and there's one particular story that runs throughout the whole book, Oisin and the Gene, Oisin in the Land of Eternal Youth, which is about loss of innocence, etc. But there are lots of dark elements in the stories. So I thought that a darker element within the real narrative, if you will, or the narrative of the real place in a real time, it would be appropriate for it to have a darker element as well.
And what makes Colin want to investigate these stories? Because it's not necessarily a thing that a young person would want to do.
It's not, and he's reluctant, first of all. I think, first of all, his motivation is because his uncle's asked him to do it, and it's something to do. And I think he respects his uncle. And I think after a short period of time of being with his uncle, he can see his uncle's close to retirement. In fact, he's retired from his full-time job as a GP in Duns in the Borders, but he's helping the team out in Uist with a locum. He's done that over many years. He spent one of his weeks of his holiday doing a locum there to help them, because it's difficult for them to get locum cover in those days. But he's also lost his wife 18 months ago, and I think quite early on Colin can see his uncle's vulnerability for the first time, and he's got to step up in his relationship with him. So I think initially to help him out, I think he then begins to enjoy it. Something he's never done, and he's getting pulled. Beg your pardon, the stories themselves are powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they pull him in, and he's never heard the likes. His mum's from Barra. He spent most of his summer holidays in Barra and Elwood, but he's never quite heard these stories told in this way. And I think he's also aware the old boy's 88. He might not be here tomorrow, never mind next week. There's a bit of a race against time as well, and he's got the time, he's got the place. And I think there's a bond between him and Jane, and he appreciates what she's doing for her great uncle. And he appreciates, I think, her situation. She's a young mother with 3 children. She's in a difficult relationship with her husband, who's a bit of a, you could say, and a bully. So these are all factors. I actually think at the end of the day, though, the key factor is the power of the stories.
Well, it certainly captures the imagination, and you're not hearing them anywhere else.
No.
You're hearing them directly from the horse's mouth.
Horse's mouth.
And going back. And now you've done something similar to this, have you not? Have you?
I have done a wee bit of. I've done a wee bit of recording in my time, and I've told stories over the years. And yeah, and I suppose one of my roots into the book was I've been kind of fascinated by not only the storytellers, but those who did choose to record them, and about their relationships. It's an interesting dynamic, and there's a project that I was involved in called Toprendogisch, or the Kiss to Riches, where when you access whatever, you put the name of a song or a story into the search engine, you eventually hear the storyteller or the singer telling us. You'll also hear the interviewer, and you get a feel of that dynamic, that intimacy. And I've always been a bit intrigued by that.
Yeah, and I think any of us who would sit at our granny's knee or on the sofa and just listen to the stories of the times gone past, because that was the entertainment. Before there was TV, or when there was TV with black and white or 3 television channels that wasn't on during the day, people had to tell stories, and they were highly entertaining. And also for the Ceilidh Club, we're indebted to Cecil Sharp, who was a Victorian man who realised that with the Industrial Revolution, the stories were being lost. The oral tradition of stories and music was being lost. So he went round the country collecting stories, and then left money in his will for Cecil Sharp House to be built, and the songs to be captured for eternity. There. So a good shout out to the storytellers, and how nice that runs through this excellent book, A Summer Like No Other. And in the 78, it was Archie Gemmill who had that iconic goal, which has stood the test of time potentially until our last performance with McTominay and the others who created those 4 marvellous goals that we saw a couple of weeks ago.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. All right, well, going on to storytelling, let's turn to our final book of our quadrant, and this is this utterly beautiful copy. Just get my fingerprints. I'll put my fingers over the fingerprints. This beautiful, beautiful book of Celtic myths by Dorling Kindersley that Martin has written, and it's a complete Dorling Kindersley book. It is the most beautiful, beautifully illustrated book, with wonderful storytelling attached to it, and it is just utterly gorgeous. Now, Martin, tell us, how did this come about?
Well, the first thing I say, it's the fastest book I've ever written. I was on holiday in the Balearics, end of May, and this email came in. I said I'll have a look at that after the holiday, but I didn't, because it said, "Do you want to write a book?" And I thought, oh well, is this AI or something like that? And I opened the email, and the editor, Marie Greenwood, said, we're compiling a series of myths. We've got Norse myths, we've got Chinese myths, we've got Egyptian myths, and would you like to write the Celtic myths? And I said, let me have a think about that. I had knowledge of the Scottish and Irish ones, and many of them, but I thought, well, what do I know about Welsh myths, etc. But after thinking about it and getting some more encouragement from her, I accepted the challenge. And within probably a year of me actually commencing, the book was published and beautifully illustrated by Katie Ponder. Some of the stories I've told for over 20 years in Gaelic and in English. Some I've heard from oral sources, others I've read in books. And it was an absolute joy to put them on the page, but also to research others, including the Welsh ones from the Mabinogi, which is one of the famous sources of Welsh myths. And delighted. A whole range of stories: Ireland, Scotland, Wales, predominantly, but also including Brittany, Cornwall, and the Isle of Man.
Wow.
and featuring the main heroes of the mythological culture of those places.
And it's a completely different world. I mean, it's a completely different world, isn't it?
Completely different.
With some very challenging pronunciations.
Telling you. Fortunately, there's a glossary.
There is a glossary at the back. Yes, there is a glossary at the back that helps with all of that. But so, I mean, had the work that you've done on the Welsh poems beforehand and the research, did that help with this?
I think it helped with some of the pronunciations of the names, and I knew some of the places. And I had begun to read some of the stories of the Mabinogi, but I wasn't so acquainted with them. But certainly this encouraged me to delve into them more deeply, and they're quite different from the Gaelic stories as well. And so the main heroes of the Gaelic stories are Finn MacCool, Fiú MacCool, and Cúchulainn. They would be the main heroes of the Gaelic story. The Welsh ones would be Pwych, the Prince of Dyfed, and Rhiannon, and Branwen, and these kind of people. So great stuff. And they're also so the book, as you can see from the illustrations, are aimed at children aged 7 to 9. But everybody who's seen the book and has maybe purchased the book or read the book agrees that they're for all ages.
They are. They are.
And indeed, these same stories are stories that I've told them to children, but I've also told them to adult-only audiences to, they seem to have enjoyed them.
I was reading the one about the man with the furry ears, the horse ears.
Yeah,
it's very, very good. And
so that's based in Cornwall in this book. It's the Cornish story of the book, but I originally have read 2 versions, one from Wales, but the version I've been telling over the years is from Scotland.
Right, okay.
But I think it's actually originally a Greek story, so it just shows how some of these stories travel.
Right.
They've travelled over the years.
And is the moral of the stories the same?
The same. The same of them all. The same of them all.
Okay. And are there any different themes, bigger themes between different locations in the stories, the myths?
I think some of the same things. There's quests, there's loyalty, there's bravery, there's justice, there's treachery.
Yeah.
Big problem. There's love. There's a challenge between the mortal world and the world of the supernatural beings.
The sort of thing that Hollywood just loves.
Indeed.
And, do you have a favourite?
Well, I probably do, and it's probably. I suppose it's a story I've told over many years. It's also a story which is very pertinent to a summer like no other as well, and that's Oisin on the Gíl Law, Oisin in the Land of Eternal Youth. I mean, I think that whole concept of going to this place. So Oisin goes to the Land of Eternal Youth with Niamh, who's a princess from there, to marry her, but on the condition that he can't then return home. But when he's been there for a long time in the Land of Eternal Youth, the sun shines all the time, nobody grows old, and everybody's happy all the time. But he and initially he's happy there as well. He's delirious. He settles in well. He can't believe he's come to such an amazing place. But after a while, he begins to miss home. He begins to miss what was normal, I guess, before. He misses his family, and he convinces Niamh to let him to return to the Gaeltacht of Scotland and Ireland just one more time. And of course, things go awry when he comes back. So yeah. And it's about loss of innocence and making promises that you maybe don't fully understand the implications of it. So it probably stands out as my favourite.
But there's so many in here that I don't know quite how many stories there are, but there's an awful lot.
22.
You know how many stories there are in here. 22 stories, and they're just lovely, and they are enthralling and entertaining and fun and great fantasy. And many with a moral point to them. Indeed. At the end as well. Yeah. And some of them I've read that many of the stories, many stories were about warning children about not to go near the water or something like that, right? To keep them away. Does that come through in all of this? I mean, are they warnings or are they?
There are some warnings in some of them. That particular one was about a water horse. So they would say, because the lochs would be deep.
Yeah.
don't go near the loch because there's a water horse there. If you go too close, it'll come out and it'll take you away. And that was to discourage them from from jumping into the loch if they weren't able to swim properly. So that's certainly an example of that. As I say, there are warnings in some, but not across all of them.
Brilliant. Right. So this is all these books are available. Most of them from all good booksellers. But let's just go through so that people remember. We started off with Running Between Two Dragons, the four-language poetry. I'll just move this. That's it. The four-language poetry collection that is available in Catalan, in Welsh, English, and Gaelic. That's that one there. A beautiful illustration.
Oh, beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Just to say, the two dragons are obviously the dragon of Wales, but also St. George, Saint Jordi, is who killed the dragon, is the patron saint of the Catalan people.
Ah, right, okay.
So that's the two dragons.
There we go. Then we have this was next, wasn't it?
Yep.
Poems chiefly in the English dialect. And that might be hard to get hold of, is it?
Drunk Muse Press.
Drunk Muse Press.
It's certainly available from their website. They're a Stonehaven-based
Stonehaven,
publisher. Yeah, doing great things.
Brilliant.
And lots of new poets coming on stream all the time.
Very good. And then we have Summer Like No Other, or if you want the Gaelic version,
Ceilidh Ceachtaíoch.
Ceilidh Ceachtaíoch. Right, there we go. Very nice covers as well on that one.
Yeah.
Was there any reason for changing it between the cute baby and the pram, who I guess is not you?
No, not me.
Looks a bit like my brother, actually. They're too ginger.
It was a 70 shot. Both from Loath Press.
Right.
I think just for the time the English novel was published, they had a different house style and a style for their new. I didn't want to
It's more modern.
More modern and a bit of a difference between the two. The two books. Beautiful.
I just saw a very nice review by Joyce McMillan in the Scotsman.
I was delighted.
And finally, the Celtic Myths, which is the complete Dorling Kindersley, beautifully illustrated, wonderfully written guide. And that's fantastic. Martin, thank you very much. What are you going to do next then? You're going to put your feet up and say, I've written 4 books. I've had 4 books published in the last 18 months or so. I'm going to do nothing and play video games.
Absolutely. I'm going to relax a wee bit. I've actually for my sins decided to write a play. I'll tell you about that.
Martin, thank you very much indeed for joining us here for our Ceilidh Pub Spotlight. And we wish you all the best in your coming playwriting experience, because you might as well add playwriting to the list of everything else that you do.
Thanks very much, Ed. Really, really delighted to have the opportunity. Thanks again.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.